I got the invitation to go on this Armed Lutheran radio show, though. You know this guy? Have you seen this? There's two things that I would like to say that make me feel safe. Number one, the fact that there is a radio show called the Armed Lutheran Podcast somewhere in the world. That makes me feel safe.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I am your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran. This is episode number 395. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week again this week. Welcome aboard to those of you who are new to the show. Glad to have you with us. First off, before we get started, my apologies for releasing a show late, or for not releasing a show last weekend, I should say. Had a long weekend of volleyballing, and Pastor Bennett and I just could not work out our schedule to get together before it was too late, and the volleyballing happened. So here we are with our first Clinging to God and Gun show of 2024 with Pastor John Bennett of St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. Before we get to that, though, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping. First off, a quick thank you to all of the wonderful people who help make this show possible. Armed Lutheran Radio is listener-funded, and that means we have no advertising, we have no sponsors. We rely on the generosity of the men and women that we like to call the Reformation Gun Club. People like Dan from South Lyon, Michigan, Melvin from Holt, Missouri, the disreputable Bartlett, Jim from Rincon, Georgia, Steve from Spotsylvania, Virginia, Tony from Little Elm, Texas, John from Spokane, Washington, Robert from Mascoutah, Illinois, Peter from White Bear Lake, Minnesota, and Robert from Monroe, Georgia. Thank you all so much, and to all of the members of the Reformation Gun Club, thank you so much for your support. We really do appreciate what you do, because without you, we would not be able to do all of this. There are things that have to be paid for to make this show possible, and these people, these fine people, and many more make it possible. If you would like to join them and get access to some exclusive content, hundreds of hours of exclusive content, some cool Armed Lutheran swag, and invitations to our monthly online hangouts, visit reformationgunclub.com. And speaking of online hangouts, our March online hangout is coming up. That is going to be, I haven't decided exactly on a date. It will be the week before Palm Sunday, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. I'll be sending out an announcement in the coming days with the exact date and time. And so look for all of that. Two quick things before we get to Pastor Bennett. Firstly, for those of you who like a little Christian heavy metal, I have a new album coming out called Mankind Fell that is due to come out on March 31st. I posted a video of the title track and a preview of the album on the Metaloid YouTube channel. That is Metal Lloyd, that is the name of the band. The title track is coming out on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, etc. on March 12th, and you can check out those videos and a lot more at Metaloid, METALLOYD, band.com, or you can go to armedlutheran.us/music. Also, the book, The Fifth Command, has been re-released in preparation for the sequel, which is finally wrapping up editing. We're in the final stages of editing. The new release features a new cover with new cover art, an excellent new map, and some minor editing updates. Look for a link for that in the show notes as well, or go to the website at armedlutheran.us/books. And part of what has been done, part of the reason for the re-release is the upcoming sequel. It's part of what I'm calling the 10 Commands series. The Fifth Command and the upcoming sequel, they follow the adventures of four intrepid characters whom may or may not be loosely based on your favorite podcasters. along the way, they meet some amazing people. They do some amazing things. They teach some amazing and important biblical truths about government, about love of neighbor, faith, sacrifice, marriage, forgiveness, and much more. And we'll be making all of that available for the sequel available for pre-order soon, including, I'm thinking, a package deal with both books and the reading guides that go with them. So check that out at armedlutheran.us/books and look for the opportunity to pre-order the sequel. If you have not gotten The Fifth Command, I hope you will go check it out, and I'd love to hear what you think of it. So Pastor John Bennett, the Pistol Packing Padre, joins us for the first time in 2024. Welcome back, my friend. Good to get together with you again.
Yes, it's been too long.
It has been way too long. So much has happened since last we were together. And as we are recording this, President Biden is probably slurring his way through the State of the Union.
The state of confusion.
The state of confusion, that's exactly right. And folks, we thought about covering it and reacting to it, but the more we thought about it, the more we realized that would just be awful.
Yes.
I mean, to do it, we would have to make it a drinking game, right? I mean, that's the only way we could survive, is to drink while we're watching. And maybe take a drink every time he stammers, or every time he mispronounces something, or every time he reads a stage prompt from the prompter,
Every time he lies or gets lost on stage.
Or says MAGA Republicans.
Yeah.
But the problem there is that we'll probably end up with liver disease by the end of the show, so...
Either that or just outright alcohol poisoning.
That would get us first, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So instead, we're going to discuss a topic that is probably going to come up in tonight's speech, and by the time you're listening to this, you'll know for sure. Maybe not, because this is a topic that probably doesn't play well for the president's reelection chances, and that is crime. Despite the delusional assurances of the media lackeys, the talking heads around the country, crime is a major issue for voters this year. I think was it crime and immigration coming out of Super Tuesday? The exit polls were showing those were the top two concerns for voters.
Immigration, crime, and the economy are the top three. And I didn't pay attention to any exit polls. I'm just glad that Nikki Haley ceased her Don Quixote chasing at windmills campaign.
Yeah.
I was tempted, now that we have this fancy AI stuff, I was going to have AI create a mashup of Nikki Haley as Don Quixote and title it Nick Quixote.
With Trump's face on the windmill.
Yeah. It drives me nuts that she calls herself a conservative. She's part of the DC swamp. I mean, if she was in office, I think the betting pool would be the over-under for the number of wars she would start.
She may not be necessarily part of what I'd consider the swamp, but she has that same mentality, right?
Yeah.
She and if you notice, the only states that she won were states that Biden won in the last election. The only states that she won in the primaries. So she doesn't appeal to red state voters. Because she's way too hawkish and way too interventionist. She'd get us, the popular perception is that she would get us into World War III over something stupid.
Right. Did you see it was Fox News was doing some panel or something at some restaurant in New York, and the guy asked a lady, what she thought about, I forget exactly the wording, but this lady basically said, Nikki Haley's been menopausal. Can you imagine how horrific that would be to have her as president? Yeah. But the funny thing is that the Fox News guy tried to spin it that she would go for the most qualified candidate despite their gender, when she basically said she could never vote for a woman. So, and he wanted a woman's opinion on it. So
Right.
she gave it to him.
She gave it to him, and that's not the opinion he wanted.
Yeah.
Yep. But have you noticed? I mean, if you really want to see, if the left, one of their favorite things is to gaslight us, tell us how great the border is the most secure that it's ever been. The economy's doing great. Inflation is at an all-time low. We've created more jobs than any other president in modern history. So crime is another one of these issues that we're getting gaslighted about. But if you want to know the truth about how crime is, just look at what's happening in blue states and blue cities around the country and ask yourself, why is this happening now? So let's look at, I picked out a few interesting examples from some blue states and cities, and I wanted to get your reaction to these, and then to sort of wrap up the discussion at the end, I want to consider, why do you think this is all happening now? What's the best construction on to explain what's going on? For example, in New Mexico, Governor Grisham there declared gun violence a public health emergency. You remember, was this last year that she tried to ban all concealed carry, all lawful carry of firearms anywhere in New Mexico?
Yeah.
And that created a backlash even among, civil libertarians.
Yeah. No, I remember that. And I think she was trying to block it in just the area around Santa Fe, I think.
Albuquerque and Santa Fe.
Yeah.
But even like the ACLU was like, whoa, wait a minute. You can't do that. And
right.
So the backlash caused her to sort of back off from that after, I think, about a week. But she's still been, actively trying to restrict lawful gun ownership. But this week she signed, I think, 4 crime prevention bills into law, and a couple of them have some merit. The 2 violent crime-related bills that she signed on Monday were something called SB 96, which strengthens penalties for second-degree murder-related offenses, and something called SN 271, which mandates that judges hold certain violent defendants without bond if they're accused of having committed another felony while out on bond for a previous crime. And she says, it's time we treat crime like the serious problem that it is. And my first reaction to reading that was, you've been governor since 2019.
Right.
Why are we just now treating crime like the serious problem it is?
It's the serious problem crime poses for re-election efforts for Democrats in the state of New Mexico.
Yes. I think that is the prevailing thread for all of these stories. All their soft on crime policies are coming back to bite them now that crime is on the rise and voters are noticing.
Right. Yeah, when you let somebody out without requiring bail because, they must have just been disadvantaged. Really, they're the victim, even though they, senselessly slaughtered somebody for looking at them the wrong way on the sidewalk. They're suddenly realizing, hey, these policies really aren't that popular with the voters, even the Democrats who we depend upon to elect us.
You mean voters don't like being robbed and raped by people we let back out on the street? Shocker that.
Not so much. Not so much.
Now, she did sign a couple of gun restriction bills. I wanted your take on these. The first was restricting concealed carry within 100 feet of a polling place. And I think the article said there's like 11 other states that have similar restrictions. And then extending the waiting period to buy a gun to 7 days. I think the previous waiting period was like 3. What are your thoughts on those two proposals?
Waiting periods, that's just to give her a political talking point because,
Yeah.
as you and I know, waiting periods really don't work because the only people that abide by them are the law abiding. Turns out criminals really don't care because, when they pick up a gun from Jojo down the street, doesn't make them wait at all as long as they've got cold hard cash.
Well, and on top of that too, if you think of like mass shootings, for example, the people who commit mass murder generally don't do it in a fit of pique. They don't like get mad and then immediately run to the gun store to buy a gun to take out their frustrations. They plot and
they
plan this stuff out for weeks, months, even years. You remember that crazy kid in California? Was it Santa Cruz or Santa Clara? The crazy kid who was his diaries were all about girls rejecting him, and even though he was rich and drove fancy cars, and he drove around, he ran over people, and then he shot people in 2 or 3 different locations.
I think, was that Santa Barbara?
Maybe it's Santa Barbara, or maybe was Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara was the one where the two muzzies.
That was San Bernardino.
Oh, that was San Bernardino. God, I get them confused.
Yeah,
There's too many Sans in California.
There are. I'm glad that I'm less confused in life now that I no longer live there.
So maybe it was Santa Barbara. But in any event, it turns out that the gun that he used, right, he had multiple guns. So he'd passed 10-day waiting periods in addition to the background checks before committing his shooting spree. So,
right.
So waiting periods are this silly idea that somehow people who commit gun crime do it on a whim, when most of the people who commit the mass murder obviously do not, that none of them do. And the idea too, like you were pointing out, that since most of the people who are committing the gun violence are gangbangers and career criminals, they're not exactly going out and legally buying firearms in the first place.
Right. If I remember correctly, the statistic for the percentage of gun-related homicides, not including suicide, that were gun-related is 80%.
You mean gang-related?
Yes. I'm sorry. What did I say?
You said gun-related. The gun-related crimes that are gun-related are 83%.
Gun-related homicides, not including suicides, 80% of them are gang-related.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. I thought I'd been drinking for a second there. Sorry.
That's all right.
That's all right. Now, here's the interesting thing about these 2 gun-related bills that the governor did sign. There are carve-outs and there are exemptions for concealed carry permit holders in both of those cases. So I thought that was interesting. According to statistics, and this is the funny thing, because this is mentioned in this article that I found on MSN, but they don't dig deeper into these stats. According to statistics from the governor's office, New Mexico's firearm-related death rate has climbed 87%. From 2011 to 2021. Now, lies, and damn statistics. If you actually drill down and go look at the graph, firearm-related death was basically flatlined from 2011 to 2019. It was like 11 point whatever per 100,000. Then suddenly, mysteriously, when Governor Grisham gets elected, it skyrockets between 2020 and 2021.
So do they suddenly start including suicide statistics in that?
I don't know. I think that's actual gun-related, because Grisham has been, like most Democrats, soft on crime. And I think part of that is the crime increase during the pandemic, and then also the fallout from all of the defund police stuff and the pulling back police from doing their jobs, basically. So the statistic is cited as, oh yeah, it's climbed precipitously from 2011. Well, you don't have to go back to 2011. It jumps in the last 2 years of that they present in the graph, and it's all during the pandemic and Grisham's first term in office. Funny that.
Which isn't surprising. Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't be shocked if we found out that she decided to include incidents of self-defense with the use of a firearm as
firearms-related deaths. Yeah.
Yeah. So who knows?
Yeah, those numbers are always fudgy because, like you said, they throw in the self-defense stuff, they throw in the suicides, and then they try to make it look like it's all crime.
Right.
And that it's all because of the guns.
What can you do? Commies are going to commie.
That's right. Exactly right. Now we move north to Oregon next, and lawmakers there have voted to recriminalize certain drugs after a surge in overdose deaths resulted in the governor declaring a state of emergency for Portland's fentanyl crisis, which has basically put an end to what was a kind of a flagship liberal policy. It was kind of the first of its kind around the country.
It was cool when it was just the homeless and minorities, but when it's a surge and, oh no, we better start doing something about this.
Yeah, when everybody's keeling over dead, and when your city starts to get filled up with the homeless and they're just on every street corner and they're falling out dead. So this bill recriminalized the possession of small amounts of drugs, and that was passed by the Senate 21-8 on Friday after the House passed it 51-7 on Thursday last week. The bill is now on the governor's desk, who said in January that she was open to signing a bill that would roll back decriminalization. The governor, Tina Kotek, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler, and Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega Peterson last month declared a 90-day state of emergency for downtown Portland over the public health and public safety crisis fueled by fentanyl, which incidentally is fueled by our border crisis.
Imagine
that. And I'm sure all three of them have no interest in closing the border.
No, they see those as undocumented voters.
What was the word that they used for it? There was newcomers.
The Biden administration referred to them as newcomers.
Our newcomers. Holy crap.
Talk about Orwellian language.
Yeah, no kidding. And remember, too, that this was a state, Oregon, that was perfectly happy to let Antifa and BLM take over Portland. Remember that autonomous state right in the middle of downtown Portland?
The CHOP zone.
The CHOP.
Or was that Seattle? I mean, they both had them going on. Where
they both
these
did.
No-go zones. Yeah.
I think CHOP was in. I want to say CHOP was in Portland, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But they both had this going on, where basically the police just didn't do anything, and Antifa and BLM took control of the middle of the city. But that was when President Trump was in office.
Right.
So funny that.
So of course you heard about. Well, there was an interesting case in that there was the son of some man who had gotten killed in the CHOP zone. And he ended up suing the city for wrongful death.
Oh, yeah. I never did hear how that suit came out, though.
I didn't either, but I hope that
something tells me they probably
got some justice for his son.
Something tells me that one probably got quietly settled out of court.
I'm sure.
And never saw the light of day in the headlines.
Yeah, those kinds of cases, they like to sweep those under when their policies fail, they'll do everything they can to obfuscate the truth.
Yes.
That these policies, they don't work and they get people killed.
Yeah. Yep. And I want to get to that to sort of hone in on that point here in a minute, but let's take a look. Let's skip across to the East Coast here because none of this crap's happening in the middle of the country. Washington, D.C., once considered the murder capital of the country, if you recall. It was so bad that they had to change the name of their NBA franchise from the Bullets to the Wizards because they thought it presented the wrong image of the city. But today, homicide in D.C. is the highest it's been in 20 years. From 22 to 23, so over the course of the last 2 years, the homicide rate rose 35%, which makes me really excited to be flying there with my family at the end of the month.
Well, when your mayor has the same last name as a Nintendo villain, Miriam Bowser,
Yes.
Yeah. Well, is anybody shocked at this? The part that is so sad and depressing about this is that this is our nation's capital.
Yes.
And it's one of the unsafest cities in the country.
Yeah. It's the place where kids all over the country come to see and actually, with their own eyes, see this country's history. The museums, the monuments, and then you have this. They also get to see how horrible the Capitol is. It just
they get to witness the complete dysfunction of our government.
Yeah. Well, in response, apparently, lawmakers have had enough. They've passed something called the Secure D.C. Omnibus Amendment Act of 2024, which doesn't...
Here's a mouthful.
I started to say, it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. It includes, and I haven't seen the text of this, but according to this article that I read, it includes more than 100 proposals to fight crime, including ramping up gun violence penalties, which you and I have advocated for. If you want to do something about people who are misusing firearms, increase the penalties for doing it, and actually, prosecute people too. That's, if you ramp up the penalties but don't prosecute anybody, I'm not sure whether this will help. But still, it adds punishments for organized retail theft. And it was so like the gangs
looting.
Yes, basically. So the gangs that go in, the smash and grab, like a dozen guys go with the masks on, go rummage a store, and everybody stands back and watches. And this was passed by the D.C. Council 12-1 on Tuesday. Wonder who that one council member was that said, this crime stuff, that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's already illegal, so we don't have to prosecute it because everybody already knows you're not supposed to.
This is just redundant. We're just passing laws we don't need. We've already got laws against this stuff.
This is a waste of the taxpayers' time.
Yes. I'm picturing, that meme with the dog who's sitting at the table in his kitchen drinking coffee, and the kitchen's on fire, and he's like, "This is fine."
That's our entire nation right
Pretty
now.
much. Now, on the D.C. Council's website, it says that this act, I'm not going to read the whole thing again, would eliminate or extend the length of statutes of limitations for certain serious crimes. So apparently people were committing crimes, and then because the police department I'm guessing here, the police department had a humongous backlog of crimes they hadn't solved. By the time they actually found somebody who'd committed a crime, they'd already gotten past the... they were already past the statute.
That expired.
Yep. So they've extended that for certain crimes. I don't know which ones. Probably murder. Probably all the worst ones. They're probably ridiculously short.
Knowing DC, I wouldn't be surprised if it was posting politically incorrect stuff on social media.
That could be too. It would make misdemeanor arrest warrants extraditable, and also clarify that GPS records in the possession of the Pretrial Services Agency can be admissible to prove a defendant's guilt. I'm not sure what that means. That kind of sounds like that if the Pretrial Services Agency has GPS proof that you committed a crime or were at the scene of a crime when it was committed, that's not admissible.
Like they're saying it's not admissible, or that it is?
It's going to become admissible.
Oh, just like it was with the January 6th protesters.
Yeah. So
even though you had people testifying related to, drop boxes and tracking cell phone traffic at election drop boxes or ballot drop boxes, that No, that's not in any way accurate. That's not admissible.
Yeah.
Which what's that nitwit's name down in Georgia that's trying to prosecute Trump? But
Fannie Willis.
can't. Yes, Fannie.
That's going well.
A lady who speaks out of her ass. What an unfortunate name. Anyway, that she was trying to claim that GPS data from phones was, not accurate because
Right, because it showed.
Yes, it showed that she was tipping this guy, before she said she actually had been.
Yep. Funny that. It's interesting how technology is all the rage until it undermines your narratives, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, or where is it which city was it that they decided to cancel? Chicago. They decided to cancel this contract that they have with this company that provides the shot tracking, the gunshot tracking data, because it was showing too many gunshots in black communities.
Well, and the interesting part about that story is that there was still a certain amount of time on their contract,
Mm-hmm.
and this company said, "Screw you guys! If you're going to cancel our contract, we're done. We're no longer providing you any services." Which really, really sucks for the people who are, victimized, or loved ones are victimized, and they're seeking justice.
Yeah. And that's going to get to one of the points I want to make here at the end and get your thoughts on as well, because the consequences of making political decisions with regards to public safety, something that politicians are not very good at doing. Now, let's see. The next place I wanted to go to was New York City, where, of course, New York is hemorrhaging residents and businesses as a result of their sanctuary city policies, their crime policies, their taxes. COVID policy is what really started it. And I'm sure their prosecutorial policies with regards to Trump and his businesses is probably going to drive even more people out.
Of course.
But cops retiring in record numbers, moving to other states. Well, today, Governor Hochul announced that members of the New York National Guard are going to be sent into New York City's subways to prevent crime. She's deploying 750 members of the National Guard and 250 state troopers and police officers from the Metropolitan Transit Authority to assist city police with bag searches. The plan is to rid subways of people who commit crimes and protect New Yorkers, whether you're a commuter or a transit worker. So apparently there have been a spate of assaults against transit workers. Now there
was a story of a conductor that had just poked his head out on the platform while the subway train was at the station, and some guy just ran through and slashed his throat.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Sheesh. But according to this article, police data, it says, show that crime has dropped in recent years. Now, notice this, the juxtaposition between this and the next paragraph. But overall, crime was up 45% in the month of January.
But it's dropped in recent years.
And that 40...
I wonder if those recent years were the Giuliani years.
It's probably under Governor Grabass. Whom we'll mention in a moment, because I think Hochul was his lieutenant governor. Is that right? Isn't that right?
I believe so.
I believe so. So, according to this, so the 45% increase was driven in large part by grand larcenies, pickpockets, and property theft crime. In response, Mayor Adams sent 1,000 police officers into the subways in February, which he said caused crime to go down by 15%. So crime went up 45% in January. They sent in 1,000 cops, and so now it's only up by 30%, I guess. If it went up 45% and then he dropped at 15, I'm assuming that means that it's still 30% up 30% from the first of the year. I'm not sure how the math works on that. It's New York math.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll say his policies are working.
Yes, I'm sure. So here's an interesting statistic. Listen to this. MTA CEO, that's the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, CEO Jano Lieber, who spoke alongside Governor Hochul on Wednesday, said that 38 people were arrested for crimes against transit employees last year, and those suspects had over 600 prior arrests.
Oh my gosh.
38 people. So citing NYPD data, Lieber says that 1% of subway suspects are responsible for well over 20% of the crime on New York subways. And I think you and I have talked about this in the past. I think there was an article that we reviewed years ago where the guy's point was, and we were talking about things like broken window policy and that kind of stuff, where what you're really, when you talk about crime in our, well, around the country really, but in our, particularly in our inner cities, the vast majority of the crime that is taking place is committed by an infinitesimally small fraction of the overall public, right? The number of criminals in the country is actually fairly small. And an even smaller, a tiny subset of those people are the ones who are committing the majority of the crimes because they're repeat offenders. And
yeah, it's funny how if somebody commits a minor crime and you put them behind jail, they can't commit worse crimes. But if you let them out, they just learn how to do worse things somehow.
And that's, you talked about, I remember you talked about this in a previous episode too, about the whole idea of broken window policy, where if you're, if you are hard on these softer crimes that people are being allowed to basically get away with no bail, you're likely to catch somebody who's either committed a crime in the past that's much worse or is going to commit something much worse in the future. Right?
Right.
This article points out, Mayor Adams points out that those repeated offenders, those 38 suspects, were tied to 1,100 other crimes. Not counting the assaults on the transit workers. 1,100 other crimes by just 38 people. Now extrapolate that out to the entire criminal population, all the crimes being committed in the city of New York. How, if we could control by doing, putting people in jail and keeping them there, control that tiny percentage, that 1% of suspects, what kind of an effect would that have? I mean, if you take their race out of the equation, which they won't do.
Right.
But if you take their race out of the equation and look at it objectively and just say, okay, you've committed this crime, we're putting you in jail, how many other crimes are going to be avoided?
Yeah, it's this fascinating idea that if you enforce the law, crime goes down.
That's a crazy idea. Where did you get that? Who ever heard of such a thing?
I just came up with it. I must be a genius. Did you hear what the bill that the House just, I don't know if they passed it, but it was introduced. They were calling it the Laken-Riley Act.
Oh.
And basically it was, this isn't going to pass with the Senate that we have right now, unless there's somebody who jumps across the aisle and says, I really like to win re-election. All I have to do is pull Kristen Sinema. But Biden's not going to sign it. Anyway, this bill would require the detainment of any illegal immigrant who commits an act of robbery. Mm-hmm. Because, hey, if they're willing to commit robbery, chances are they're willing to commit other more heinous acts like murdering nursing students when they're jogging by themselves. That's
assaulting police in New York, like we saw in that video, that famous video, which was just less than 2 weeks ago, wasn't it? Where you had this just gang of immigrants attacking police officers in Times Square, and then flipping the bird to the people to the press who were, recording them as they were leaving.
And I heard that there was an arrest made for those guys after they were let out without bail.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them had boarded a plane to Arizona where they were promptly arrested for being in the country illegally. I doubt it went anywhere because, ICE, their hands are tied by the criminal in chief. But anyway.
And was it Arizona that recently arrested a guy who was wanted for a crime in New York and refused to extradite him to New York because they knew they said, no, we're not going to send him back to New York because you're just going to let him go?
I don't know. I hadn't heard about that.
I think that might have been Arizona. And I think this was a violent crime, and he was arrested. He committed the crime in New York, or was caught and arrested in Arizona. And Arizona, I believe it was Arizona. It certainly wouldn't have been California or New Mexico. So I'm thinking it was Arizona. And they said, no, we're not going to extradite him to New York for trial. We're going to try him here because he'll just be put back on the streets in New York.
Right.
So Mayor Adams says, and I love this, we don't have a surge in crime. We have a surge in recidivism. So this is more Orwellian talk, right?
Yeah. Because if you let them out, they're not going to commit crimes again, right? They've learned their lesson. They're willing to be better for the sake of the rest of society.
Well, I think Adams recognizes that we have a problem with letting people out, but he's not willing to say it in quite that. He won't go that far as to actually say that. So it's not a crime problem. Crime's okay. We don't have a crime problem. We have a recidivism problem. So half the people who hear that don't even know what that means. Right?
I wonder if he uses that euphemism because he doesn't want to say that we have a crime problem when the majority of the crimes are being committed by minorities.
That's what I suspect that's probably what it is. He doesn't want to admit in an election year that New York has a crime problem. And if you use the term recidivism, again, when the majority, I want to say 50% of graduates from New York high schools are not even functionally literate, they don't even know what recidivism means.
Right.
So use a big term that no one will understand and deny that there's a crime problem. And this all gets back to that whole, the thread that we're talking about that ties all these together, which is Democrat governors, Democrat city councils, Democrat mayors who have crime problems because of their policies. Their previous policies are now starting to wake up and realize, you know what, our policies might cost us an election.
Right. Did you hear what San Francisco did?
No. Oh, I was going to get to that next. I actually do have that next.
Okay.
So let's just jump there. I don't know why I didn't put that with the other West Coast stuff. So San Francisco, where pooping on the street is so bad that there is an app to help you navigate the city's sidewalks. Voters passed Mayor London Breeds. I love her name. It sounds like a villain from Marvel or something.
Sounds like an STD.
London Breeds ballot initiative to lift restrictions on police operations and to screen welfare recipients for drug use. Holy crap. I mean, that is so right-leaning a policy. It's so conservative a policy. I cannot believe. Now, voters passed this.
You think Ben Shapiro was running the city of San Francisco. Well, and if you test positive, they won't deny you benefits. They'll just require you to go into a treatment program to get them.
That's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But but at the same time, think about it. We do want these people to get off drugs. So if they're going to,
Right.
if we're going to say, look, you want your bennies, you're going to have to go get off. You're going to have to go get cleaned up. That's a win-win,
Yep.
right? So
Well, I think this law also allowed extensive use of police surveillance, that they're putting up a bunch of surveillance cameras all over San Francisco, and they're going to be using facial recognition to catch criminals.
yikes.
Yeah, that part sounds a little scary, but they're primarily doing this at retail establishments that are getting these mobs of kids coming in and cleaning out the store a couple times a month.
Yep. And you've got people who don't want to go shopping because of that, and you have businesses who don't want to come back to San Francisco who are leaving because we're losing money hand over fist.
Right.
So what's interesting about this is voters who passed this. I wonder what London Breed's, it says London Breed's ballot initiatives. So did the mayor propose these things and then put it to the voters so that she could, I mean, I don't know how politics works in San Francisco.
I'm not sure. California is one of those states where if you get enough signatures, you can get anything on the ballot. From what I had heard, the language that was used is that she was supportive of the measures. So I don't know if her office had pushed these things or if she realized, I better support these things publicly because if I want to win re-election, the people sure seem to like this bill.
Yeah.
Or this ballot measure, I should say.
Somebody's listening. My guess is that it's not listening to voters. I'm guessing it's probably listening to business owners and businesses who are donors to the Democrat Party in San Francisco and California, to London Breed. They're saying, look, you need to do something about crime or I'm pulling my business out of your city.
Right. Yeah. Well, if all it takes for Democrats to actually be tough on crime is for it to be an election year, maybe we should have election year every year.
Maybe.
Listen, I don't think I could survive that.
No, God.
The text messages alone are going to drive me crazy.
Oh, I'm sure. Now listen to this. This comes from San Francisco Supervisor Raphael Mandelman, who was giving a speech or speaking to activists at the mayor's election night party on Tuesday after these initiatives passed. So these are the people, the activists who helped to get this stuff, to get these initiatives passed by the public in San Francisco. He said, "You're saving the Democratic Party from itself."
And he's not wrong.
That's damning praise.
Yeah.
The party is screwing up, and you're saving us from ourselves. I mean, you're admitting that your party made the mess. And thanks to these activists and supporters who got out the vote, and see, that's the thing. Democrats don't seem to realize that if they don't do this kind of stuff in reverse course, I mean, they could very easily win re-election pretty much anywhere they're having problems around the country. Even Biden, with his electoral misfortunes currently, if he simply reinstated the policies that he reversed on day one with regards to the border, he would get a bump from
he would.
That would probably signal the end of Trump, barring some, horrible thing that happens where he, barring him going out and making some speech or doing something really horribly stupid like that press conference after the release of that report from the special counsel, right?
Oh yeah.
When he comes out and the special counsel's report exonerates him from his mishandling of classified documents because on the basis that he is this old senile dude. And so he goes out to have a press conference to deny that he's an old senile dude. and proceeds to prove to the entire world that he's an old senile dude, worse than this guy says in the report. So
Where he refers to the president, was it the president of India? He referred to him as the president of Mexico or something like that?
He referred to he said he talked to Sisi, the president of Egypt, about
Egypt, that's what it was, yeah.
About closing the border. And he was referring to the president of Mexico or vice versa. It was just and what made it worse was after finishing that terrible statement where he bumbled and lost his train of thought and forgot stuff, and then somebody yelled a question at him about the Israel-Gaza war, and he turns around and goes back to the podium and screws up the names of the presidents. Oh my gosh. And I cannot believe they let him do that.
Now, here's the thing. If Democrats just could figure out that all they have to do is not be crazy, they probably would be a lot more successful at winning elections from here on out.
I think we've said that in the past, haven't we? Like, if all they have to do, like the last election,
they're too busy stepping on their own units on a daily basis to not be crazy.
Yeah. And the election, Trump's election against Hillary, all they had to do was prove they're not. And the midterm elections, where all they have to do is prove that just show the American people that they're not a bunch of crazy idiots.
Right.
And they cannot help themselves. They absolutely cannot help themselves.
Remember Howard Dean?
Oh my gosh, the screaming.
All it took was that scream to sink his campaign, because guess what? When you did that, you seemed like an absolute crazy person. Turns out people aren't really fond of the idea of crazy people running the show in the government.
Well, and some of that gets back to their belief that social media is reality.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They get all this positive feedback from social media that suggests that the things that these crazy left-wing policies are popular, and then they go scream them from the rooftops and are shocked to find out that people aren't actually fond of these policies.
Well, I think what they've been doing, and this is their downfall, is that they create these focus groups, but the problem is the people that are on these focus groups think just the way they do.
Yeah.
And so they're in this perpetual echo chamber where they're not living in the real world, but they're too dense to realize it.
Yeah. Yeah. They get this, they come up with the crazy, they hear the support for the crazy idea. They propose the crazy idea. They get the reinforcement that that suggests the crazy idea is popular. And then when the crazy idea goes into effect and the public doesn't like it, then they just don't know what to do with that. But
right.
Unless it's an election year and it has to do with crime, apparently.
Well, who was the governor? Was it the governor of Virginia that won by basically campaigning against pushing the transgender ideology on children?
Youngkin. Yep.
Youngkin, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, don't be crazy. You might win elections.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Democrat Party lined up with all the groomers and the trannies, thinking that was the popular and progressive thing. And it's not. They were shocked to find out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right now we've got some insanity going on in Minnesota, where right now I believe it's the House and the Senate, and the governor, of course, is an absolute nut. But they passed some measure that basically would fine and close churches and religious schools if they fail to bend the knee to the gender ideology. So if somebody comes in and, it's some man who calls himself Patricia, and you refuse to marry him off to his, gay lover, that they'll fine you and close down your church.
That's the next step.
And they're pushing hard. Now, this, of course, it would require them trying to enforce this before someone would have standing to take this to the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
But the second they do that, this is going to be obliterated at the Supreme Court level because, I mean, something like that, you might get another 9-0 ruling. You know, because you despite the fact that you have several whack job liberals, if you say that you're going to shutter churches and fine them if they don't accept somebody's mental disability about their gender ideology, it's electoral suicide, because how many churches that don't believe in the gender ideology are there in this state? And people are watching. I mean, black
churches particularly are not crazy
Yes.
about that stuff.
No. And the video from these hearings at the state house, I mean, these are going to be the commercials, the campaign commercials for these candidates from now to the time of the election. If they don't
play
run
their
these
cards right.
videos and the ads, yeah.
Hopefully they'll be smart about that. I'm not sure I have a whole lot of optimism about Republicans and the way they do things. They don't seem to have any sense when it comes to this stuff.
Minnesota is a weird state. The rural, out in the country areas, very, very strong conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, the majority of Republicans that are in public office in the state of Minnesota are pretty conservative. It's not, you're always going to get the ones that like to cross the aisle and, cozy up to the liberals.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, that's not how it is in Minnesota. So it'll be interesting to see what becomes of this.
That might become an interesting test case for.
Yeah. I mean, you look at what's happening countrywide, and look what happened in California, where Trump got what? He got like 70 or 80% of the vote in the
primary out in the
primary.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just nuts. I mean, Orange Hitler beats out the liberal quote unquote Republican Nikki Haley.
You would think in California, particularly, that Haley's politics would be very popular.
Yes.
Except in a couple of counties, maybe.
Right.
But
pretty much everything but the San Joaquin Valley and maybe Orange County.
Yeah. For him to clean up 70% in California, I mean, that had to be, that was the death knell for her. I mean, and she had to realize there's no path to winning here. If the bluest of the Republican primaries is not going to turn against Trump, is 70% going to vote for Trump, there's no way she's going to win. What's her number? What are her numbers going to be in Texas? Oh my God, it's not even going to be close.
Right.
So, yeah, that is amazing. Now, hey, I alluded to this earlier. I want to get your thoughts on this. Thomas Sowell once said that, and I've heard some other people recite this quote recently, and it's had me thinking, there are no solutions, only compromises. And I think this sort of sums up a lot of the problems that we find ourselves in this country in regards to, and you can, on both sides of the aisle. I mean, you look at the Patriot Act, to all the crime stuff and all the racial sort of trying to resolve the racial issues in this country through police and crime reform and all of that people, whenever there's a problem, whether it's, all right, we just had a terrorist attack, or we have these mass shootings, or we have shootings at schools, or we have a wave of crime in our inner cities, people are quick to offer a solution, but they never seem to consider what their compromises are, right? What is the trade-off?
Right.
Because there's no solution. There is no way to solve the problem. There's only a trade-off. There's only a compromise somewhere. What are you willing to give up? So when you, whether it's bail reform or decriminalization or police funding and all this, the trade-off that they never seem to consider is that you get more crime.
Right.
Right. Remember when what was his name? The previous mayor, de Blasio in New York. When he released all the criminals from jail during COVID, because he didn't want them to, because he was worried if we have all these criminals locked up in close quarters, all these people are going to get COVID. And then he was shocked when he released them and they all went out and committed crimes.
Right.
Right. So,
well,
the solution to
prevent. Why are you even worried about whether or not criminals in prison contract COVID? Where are your priorities at that point?
Right. So the compromise was, in order to protect these criminals from a highly survivable virus, was to put them back out on the streets where they could hurt innocent New Yorkers.
Yeah.
When the better solution would have been, all right, if you're concerned that these people, obviously some of those people who are in jail are not guilty. Some of them are awaiting trial. Some of them are, overnight drunk tank kind of thing. If you can pony up millions of dollars to house illegals in hotels, why can't you put all the criminals in a hotel? Right? Just give them their own room, keep them separate, lock them there, keep them away from the public until this whole virus thing blows over. Surely there are buildings in New York that they could have used. But as with everything in this country, whenever there is a crisis, everyone, the politicians who come up with a solution don't consider the trade-offs.
Yeah.
And when it comes...
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that.
So when it comes to, all right, we got to do something about gun violence, they don't consider the trade-offs. When you take guns out of the hands of innocent citizens, particularly in the inner city, you think protecting them from gun violence, but you're not considering the trade-off, which is that you're taking guns or making it harder for the innocent people to defend themselves from crime. Right?
Yeah. And I guess a simpler way to put it is that these politicians don't think of the second order of effects.
Yeah.
They only think about the initial, okay, this is my solution. It's the perfect solution. It's the best solution there is, but they don't take a look at, okay, what are the consequences of this? So instead of trying to pass your quote unquote ideal solution, why don't you pursue the greatest good for the greatest number of people, which isn't disarming them, or it isn't releasing criminals from prison. It isn't, depriving them of their rights, whether it's the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. It's, hey, why don't we just want government to leave us the F alone.
Yeah. Protect us from the bad people by keeping the bad people away from us. Right?
Right.
And
I think it comes down to so many of these people are so egomaniacal that they cannot consider for a moment that just maybe they aren't the smartest person in the room and they don't have all the answers. And guess what? You really aren't the savior of the people. The people are pretty good at taking care of themselves if you just leave them alone.
Yeah. And that leads us, I think, to the main narrative here of all these stories is the Democrats in blue cities and states are now whining about crime and changing their laws to get tough on crime again. But are they doing it because they really were those policies really designed to make things better, and they just didn't consider the downstream effects? Or is this all playing politics? Were those policies simply, we want to get the black vote, we want to make sure we lock up the black vote, so we're going to have these soft on, which is a terribly racist pandering to suggest that in order to keep black people voting for you, you've got to make sure that they're not in jail, which is weird. Black people care about law and order too, and they're not all criminals. Or
Yeah.
or is this all because there is a genuine concern, or that they honestly believe that these policies are making things better? Are they really that blind? Or is this all just like with the crime stuff now, with the reversing course now, is this all just like, do they care now about citizens? They just didn't realize that their policies were going to cause these problems? Or is this just another one of these political pandering moves? What's the best construction here?
I don't think there is a best construction, to be honest, but my inner cynic, and this is going to sound very conspiratorial, is that the only reason that this is happening is because it's an election year. You look at all the DAs that George Soros has pushed that are incredibly lenient when it comes to major crime.
Mm-hmm.
I believe this is all by design. And this is the conspiracy part. And I don't, what's the saying this day? The only difference between the conspiracy and the truth is 6 to 8 weeks. But it's all by design to create chaos to then justify greater government control. That's what I believe. I mean, that's one of the basic motivations of communism is you create enough chaos and the people will clamor for greater government control because the government then pretends to be the solution to the problem that they created in the first place. But the reason why all this is happening now, why they are reversing course, is because none of that plays well in an election year. So, I don't think there's any best construction on this. I think that's what we're dealing with, to be honest.
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. It's like that whole, whenever the economy's bad, people don't care as much about the environment as they do when we're fat and the economy's running great and everybody's got money in their pockets and they don't have a care in the world.
People don't care about environmental measures when it means that they're going to have to pay $7, $8 a gallon at the pump.
Right. And they don't care about, these racial sort of crime reform issues until those things start to come home to roost. Right? Oh, bail reform, decriminalization, defunding police, or reducing police interactions with blacks because, we don't want to see that happening to our young men in our neighborhoods. But then when the policies to deal with those issues result in those criminals coming to your doorstep, now you're suddenly interested in crime, in being tough on crime again.
Yeah. Well, and you look at how many of their policies were motivated by race, and after a while, people finally see the reality of the situation, where if I committed the same crime that a black man committed in Chicago, I'd be sitting in jail and he'd be out without any bail. So, I mean, when your policies are outright racist, eventually people are going to see the reality of that. We live in the upside down world. Everything is insane. Nothing makes sense anymore. Let's just hope that come November, some sanity returns to politics in America.
Oh God, I hope. Although, in order to do that, we're going to get 4 more years of Trump. So I'm not sure. If that's what it takes, I'm all for it.
At least it'd be entertaining.
It'll be entertaining. I'm down for it.
Well, and at the end of the day, if you compare his policies to those of Biden, despite his off-putting personality to so many people, the policies, and he's admitted his failure to reel in spending. He admitted the mistakes that he made in passing those spending bills. So let's hope that if he wins election in November, that he actually sticks to his promises and does what he can to get this nation back on the right track.
Yeah, I could go for some mean tweets right now.
Yeah.
I can handle some mean tweets if it means the world's not on fire.
Yeah. Give me mean tweets and 219 gas any day over wars in places like Israel and
open borders and Ukraine and oh my gosh, yeah. I'll trade a mean tweet for all of that any day of the week.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that is a good place to wrap it up. Folks, if you have any questions or any comments, any thoughts, complaints, nasty comments, leave them to yourself. But if you have constructive comments you'd like to share, if you disagree with us, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Visit the feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback and leave us a voice message. And if possible, we will respond to your comments or your questions in a future episode. Or if you have a topic you'd like to hear us discuss, leave us that as well. We would love to hear it. Pastor, great to be back with you again.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to doing this again sooner rather than later.
Yes, sir.
Folks, tune in next week. Not sure what next week will be, but it'll be fun. Probably 2 weeks from now, we'll have our, I think, Palm Sunday weekend is going to be when we'll air the next online hangout. So be sure to look forward to that. As I mentioned in the open, I'll be sending out more details about the exact date and time, probably in the coming day or two. Until we get together again, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.